surgeries, crashes, and a new front wing. This week I'm chatting all about the Spanish Grand Prix, so get ready because you've been summoned to the steward's office. Hello everyone and welcome back to the steward's office. I'm Saira, and this week F1 headed out to the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya for the Spanish Grand Prix. An interesting weekend before we even started it because we had a new technical directive coming into play, and when we hit the track, well, it kicked off a little bit, I can't lie. But it was the last race in our triple header. We've got a week break after this, so a little bit of downtime for all the drivers, which I think is needed because this was a hard triple header. To be fair, other than McLaren, I don't necessarily think this triple header went the way the teams were really hoping it to. All of them had points where, yeah, it wasn't looking great. But let's have a chat about what went on this race weekend. And like I mentioned, that brand new technical directive issued by the FIA came into play at Spain. And this was all to do with the front wings and how flexible they could be. In 2024, a lot of the teams kicked up a fuss. A lot of them pointed the finger at McLaren, saying that some of the wings, McLaren's, had too much flexibility in them. And teams like Red Bull were saying, look, it's giving them a big advantage. It's why they're so quick and everything. It's why things like tyre wear are great for them. And the FIA did opt to do something, and they didn't do anything in 2024, and they didn't bring it in for the start of 2025 either. They gave the teams until the Spanish Grand Prix to change those front wings because the FIA said that they were going to be clamping down on that flexibility. It was going down from 15 millimeters of flexibility to 10 millimeters. And 5 millimeters might not sound a lot to you and me, but in terms of Formula One and engineering, 5 millimeters is a lot. That was coming in. There was a lot of talk that it was going to change a lot of the grid, that teams like Ferrari were going to be able to catch up to the front, that McLaren were going to lose a lot of pace, and we might see some differences in how the race weekend goes. Spoiler alert, it did not change anything at all. I can't say it made much of an impact, if any, and I don't know whether that's going to change when we head to different tracks, but I mean, the Spanish Grand Prix and the Spanish circuit has a really balanced sort of circuit in terms of the type of corners it has and everything, which is why we do a lot of winter testing now, or at least we used to. And so you would think you would really see if that front wing was making a difference at a circuit like Barcelona, especially at certain corners and things, but not really. We will wait and see. I just don't think it's going to make any more of an impact, to be honest. I think a lot of money has been spent on teams changing their front wings, and there's been no real payoff for the other teams who kind of pointed the finger and said that that flexible wing was too much. But technical directive is now in place and it's not going to be changing for the rest of the season. And before I get into all the actual on-track action, we are going to have a chat about Lance Stroll because he ended up pulling out from this race weekend after qualifying. Now, a couple of years ago, I want to say two, we had hit coming into pre-season testing, I think it was, and Lance Stroll ended up having quite a bad wrist injury and had to go into surgery for it. He obviously had a little bit of time off to recover and then came back to racing, and that was the last we heard of any wrist or hand pain from him. He ended up withdrawing from the past weekend's Spanish Grand Prix because he was getting pain in his hand and his wrist again, and the Aston Martin team statement did say that he is going to get surgery on it and then spend some time recovering. So that happened straight after quali, and gutted for him. Any sort of injury is not great, but to have something recur, so it's in that same place, that same hand that he ended up hurting and breaking before, that is gutting. I really hope he takes all of the time he needs to sort of rest and recoup and doesn't come back too early and aggravate that injury. They haven't put a timeline on when he's coming back. Aston Martin were down one car for the Spanish GP because Lance had withdrawn after qualifying. Your reserve driver either needs to be in qualifying or one of the practice sessions in order to run in the race. So Aston Martin only had one driver. Obviously in the coming races, if Lance isn't able to drive, they can put in Felipe Drugovich, or I think Stoffel Van Dorn is their other reserve driver. They can pop them into the car because they'll know ahead of time. But yeah, I hope he does take enough time out to rest and recoup. The next race is his home race. It is the Canadian Grand Prix. I feel like he might want to rush back for it, but I think the most important thing here is his health. So we were down to 19 drivers after that withdrawal, and here's what happened in qualifying. We are going to kick off with the Spanish drivers first because it is their home Grand Prix, and there was good news and bad news, and I'll start with the good news, and that was Fernando Alonso. He managed to get himself into Q3, top 10 spot for the start of the race, putting him in a really good position. So I was so happy for him because it has been a rough season. Carlos Sainz, on the other hand, he is the bad news, sadly. He was not able to make it out of Q1. This was his worst start to his home GP that he's ever had since he started racing in Formula 1. It was rough. He was going to be starting in P18, which then turned to P17 after Lance Stroll ended up withdrawing from the race, but definitely not where he was hoping to start. Franco Colapinto could not even finish Q1, let alone getting out of it, because he had a driveline issue that got him stuck in the pit lane, not even in his garage, not in the pit box. He was queuing up to go out on track and his car just wouldn't go. So that was Alpine continuing to struggle, and this was their 70-year anniversary as well. They had special race suits for him and for Pierre Gasly, and this was not a great celebration. Yuki Tsunoda also out in Q1, and he qualified in P20 in the Red Bull. Now, he did say towards the start of qualifying, I think, for his engineer to have a look at his floor. I think he thought there was something wrong with it. I don't know whether he ran over something. And they did end up changing his rear wing before the race. Broke Park Ferme had to start from the pit lane. Wasn't going to make a huge amount of difference, but they did change that over. So I think there was some kind of issue that they found. But I do want to point out that Yuki Tsunoda is not a bad qualifier. He has really good one-lap pace, and we saw that earlier in the year, right? We don't even have to look back to last season. Earlier in the year, when he was with Visa Cash App RB, he was putting in brilliant performances with that car. He was getting into Q3 and getting great points for the team. I don't know what is going on with that second Red Bull car in particular, but every driver that gets into that seat cannot make it work. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter how much experience they have in Formula 1. And look, it's not just me saying this, but other drivers, Max, drivers in different teams are saying, yeah, something isn't right because this isn't like Yuki. So definitely an interesting result there for him, and I would love to know what is going on with that car and going on behind the scenes. Gabriel Bortoleto actually had his best qualifying of the season so far, and he finished in P12. The Sauber was looking a lot better in Spain, and he got an absolutely fantastic result. And then for Q3, we had Oscar Piastri on pole position, Lando Norris following him, and then it was Max Verstappen, George Russell, and Lewis Hamilton rounding out the top 5. Like I mentioned, guys, this new technical directive has not changed a single thing for McLaren. They were still absolutely rapid and the team to beat throughout qualifying. I don't think there was a massive doubt that one of the McLarens would be getting pole position. It was just a bit of a mixed bag in qualifying. I mean, to see Yuki in P20, Carlos Sainz not getting out of Q1, Alex Albon got booted out in Q2. I think he'd basically approached a slow car who didn't move out of the way on his fast lap, and he had to go around it and lost a bit of time there. So further back from McLaren, there were some jumps and changes that I wasn't particularly expecting, and I was gutted for Carlos at his home race to be starting that far back. But was going to make for a slightly interesting race, though, with the way the grid was lining up. And let's have a chat about that race, because there were a few things that went on, and we'll look at who is still leading our championship. Oscar Piastri, he put in a brilliant, commanding race performance to take home the win at the Spanish Grand Prix. Drove excellently. I mean, what is there to say that we haven't already said about Oscar Piastri? His race pace and racecraft and qualifying pace just seems to be getting better and better as each race goes by, because he's learning more and applying more of it to his driving, and it's paying off so well. But that P1 meant that he is now only the third McLaren driver to get 8 podiums in a row, which is an incredible feat when this is his, third season in Formula One. I was so excited when Oscar Piastri joined Formula One because he is one of the few drivers that managed to win F3 in his rookie year and F2 in his rookie year, came into Formula One, into McLaren. And yes, McLaren did struggle a little bit that first year. He came into the team, but as they've been building pace, he's been building on his racecraft, and it's just, it's paying off beautifully for him right now. Not too far behind him in the championship or the race was his teammate Lando Norris, who managed to finish in P2. Now, he did end up losing P2 going into turn 1, had to fight for it again against Max Verstappen, but did a really, really good race performance. Managed to secure that double podium for McLaren. I mean, you really can't complain. I know he would have wanted that win, but he said himself during the post-race interviews, it just looked like Oscar Piastri had the pace. Overall for McLaren, though, a really strong weekend. And I don't think we've had a race weekend yet where it hasn't been strong, where it hasn't worked out for them. Everything has been going perfectly, dare I say. Yes, there have been races that they haven't won, but it's not impacted them in the Constructors' Championship, and both of their drivers are in P1 and P2 in the Drivers' Championship. So does it really matter? There's always going to be stuff they want to improve on, but yeah, I don't think they can really complain. Max Verstappen, he had an interesting race. It was a tough race for him, right? There were points in the race where he was complaining about the downshifts in his car, and just, it was a slightly rough race for him, even at the start. He was complaining about the downshifts. He wasn't always happy with the way the car was driving. But there were times that he looked like he had really good pace. I just don't think it was enough consistently to keep up with the McLarens, who also had really good tyre wear, and it didn't seem like Red Bull really had that in hand. We got a late safety car. They did swap Max Verstappen over to the hard tyres when everyone in front and behind him were on soft tyres, which he really was not happy about. And I will have a bigger chat about everything that happened at that safety car restart with him later. But yeah, this wasn't one of Max's best races, and I think everyone would admit that. We have had a little bit of a change in the Constructors' Championship at the top of the table, though, because Ferrari have jumped 2 places over this race weekend to get into P2. They've demoted Mercedes to P3 and Red Bull to P4. Last weekend, they were only a point away from Red Bull in 3rd place, and then I think 5 points away from Mercedes in 2nd place. And yeah, they managed to get the points they needed to secure P2 for now. We had Charles Leclerc on a podium in P3, and that was amazing. He had great race pace. Lewis Hamilton, though, had a much more difficult race. Quali went really, really well for him, and at the end of Saturday, he seemed really happy with where the car was and how it was behaving and how it felt for him. Don't know what happened when we went into the race, but he had no pace, and that was compared to his teammate, let alone other drivers around him. He finished in P6, so not horrible, but he really wanted to fight for a podium, and it just wasn't able to happen. Moving further down the grid, we have Mercedes, who did not have a great race, and let's be honest, this triple header has been kind of awful for them. Imola, not great. Monaco, awful. Spain was like Imola. It wasn't Monaco territory where it was appalling and neither driver managed to get points, but it was around about where I would rank Imola for them. Kimi Antonelli ended up having to retire on lap 55 with a power unit issue. Same sort of issue, it seems, like Fernando Alonso had in Monaco when he had to retire in DNF. Slightly concerning. 2 weekends in a row that 2 Mercedes-powered engines have conked out on their drivers and have caused them to DNF. Is it an engine overheating problem? We genuinely don't know, and I don't know whether they would let us know something like that, but we are getting to some hot countries at the moment, and Spain was particularly warm, so definitely something to watch out for, and Mercedes are probably going to want to keep a really close eye on. Imola, I think Kimi Antonelli had a power unit issue again. We had George Russell with the power unit issue in Monaco during qualifying, and then, Kimi Antonelli having to DNF here. It's a little concerning, and it's something that I'm sure Mercedes are going to be keeping an eye on. But even before that DNF, Antonelli did seem to struggle a little bit with pace compared to George Russell. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't great. The upside, I think, for Mercedes was George Russell finishing in 4th place. Really decent place to finish in, some good points for the team. But same as Antonelli, at times it didn't look like his pace was amazing. Fernando Alonso though, right? Got the biggest smile on my face to say that Fernando Alonso has finally scored his first points of the season at his home race. Took us a little bit to get there, guys, but it was worth it. He had some pretty interesting overtakes that were great to watch, but I am absolutely chuffed for him and for Aston Martin as well, especially having only one driver running in the race. To have that driver get some points home for the team is going to mean a lot to them. So a brilliant result for Fernando. The star of the show, though, has to be Nico Hülkenberg. Nico Hülkenberg, who didn't get out of Q1, managed to finish the race in P5 ahead of Lewis Hamilton. I can't lie to you, I don't know what happened with this guy's race. And he said himself, there are days where things just click and they work and, everything works out for you. And that was one of those days. But Nico Hülkenberg, we know, is a driver who, when he has a good car, can do amazing overtakes, can race very, very well. And I think Spain really showed that. So for me, it's made me so interested to see what happens when Audi comes in, if they can build a decent car, what Nico is going to be like. But that is an incredible finish for Saira in P5 and such a brilliant haul of points to have. Just incredible. Going from the highs to the slightly lows, the very lows, I guess. Williams, I think, have potentially had their worst race of the season. I genuinely think this was probably one of the worst, if not the worst so far. Walking away with absolutely no points. Alex Albon ended up having to DNF from the race, and it all kicked off pretty early on for him when his wing got damaged with an incident that he had. I think it was Nico Hülkenberg. They pitted him for a new front wing, he went back out, and then got a couple of laps later, he had an incident with Liam Lawson that broke the front wing end plate. Team told him to pit and retire the car, and as he came in to pit, we got the notification that he was being given a 10-second time penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage against Liam Lawson. So they got him to go back out, basically pitted, did the 10-second penalty in the box, went out, did a lap, came in to retire, just so that penalty didn't carry over to the Canadian Grand Prix, which teams have done before. Sergio Perez definitely did that a season or two ago with Red Bull. But yeah, 2 broken front wings, 2 incidents, and they retired his car. I don't think they wanted him to necessarily run with a broken wing, and I don't think they had any others, and there might have been other damage that we didn't know about. So a miserable race for him. Carlos finished in P14, and yeah, okay, closer to the points, but not in them. And for his home race, like I mentioned, it's gutting. I honestly thought he would score some big points, like around about when Nico Hülkenberg was in P5. I feel like, if you'd asked me a couple of races ago, I would have thought that was fully possible for Williams. To be fair, I was delusional enough to think that he could potentially be on a podium, okay? Maybe it was too delusional. Maybe I need to calm down a little bit with it. But, I mean, the pace that they've had has been incredible. And out of all of the races, for the Spanish GP to go this badly is a gutting. But let's get into what everyone has been talking about over the past day or so, and that is Max Verstappen and what happened with him after the safety car came into the pits and we had our race restart. I, for the life of me, can't really understand what happened at that restart. Everyone came into the pits basically. Nearly all the drivers opted for soft tyres because there were only a handful of laps left in the race. Red Bull had opted to put Max onto the hard tyres, which, okay, fair enough. Max was less than impressed understandably, right, didn't understand why he was on them. He was like, look, it's going to be hard to defend because to bring the heat into those tyres and to try and get them into a good window with the number of laps we had left was going to be so difficult. He was in P3 at the time. Charles Leclerc was on a new set of soft tyres. It wasn't going to look good. And he was understandably frustrated down the radio, right? That I've got no problem with because I would have been frustrated as well because you're kind of looking at your strategy like, what are we doing here? At that race restart, though, obviously because the hard tyres take a little bit longer to warm up, he had a bit of a wiggle down the start-finish straight. Car's rear end just wiggled around a little bit, and then he was on the radio complaining that Leclerc had hit him. And this was as Charles Leclerc was trying to overtake him. I couldn't see any sort of contact, and they did show the replay afterwards. There was the tiniest bit of contact, but Max was like, no, he's got to give that place back to me, which Charles obviously didn't do. GP didn't say anything, and the steward by the end of the race also said, yeah, there was nothing that needed to be done there. So that was one thing. And then he had to go off track, take to the escape road because George Russell had bumped into him a little bit, right? I wouldn't have said that he needed to give the place back there, but GP was on the radio to Max saying you need to give that place back to George. Initially, when he got that call, he did argue against it, as you'd expect him to, right? Then he seemed like he was gonna give the place back. George had obviously gotten the call that Max was gonna give it back, had gone to do it, and I don't know what happened. They nearly collided. It was a bit sketchy, right? Then Max let George overtake again, and for whatever reason, Max opted to just bump into George's car as they were side by side. I can't tell you for the life of me what was going on in his head at that point. The consensus after seeing it, I think for most people, is that it was on purpose. It didn't look like it was necessary to happen, and you never want to think a driver's going to do that on purpose, but there was no need for it. We went to the media pens afterwards with the drivers. George couldn't understand it. We had a Instagram post from Max today, which is Monday, where he did say, look, I was really frustrated and some things happened that weren't right, and, you know, I made a move that I shouldn't have, basically. Wasn't an apology per se, like he didn't say sorry, but I would say he was admitting to that move being on purpose because he was frustrated with his team and the strategy they'd given him at the end of the race. And look, I have no problem with people being frustrated. Emotions are emotions and we're going to feel them. And a lot of the drivers, when you're driving that quickly, when you're fighting for points, places, podiums and championships, you are going to have heightened emotions. That is not a problem at all. I do think we have to sort of draw the line on where we go with that frustration. And look, I don't care if the drivers swear down the radio, as long as they're not abusing someone down the radio, you know, when they're just sort of saying, look, this was a really bad strategy, and they're just swearing in general. It's whatever, because I'm like, they are driving at extremely fast speeds. I think we do need to draw a line where that frustration boils over into putting other drivers on track, as well as yourself, in sort of an unsafe place. Max ended up getting a 10-second time penalty for the incident. He went from P4 down to P10. Like I said, you never want to think any F1 driver is doing anything on purpose. And I absolutely don't think Max's intent was to harm anyone at all. I would never ever think that of any of the drivers. But he was obviously frustrated. And from the sounds of his post, it does sound like you kind of moved the wheel just on purpose because he wanted to get that frustration out. But there just needs to be a line there. I don't think it was quite right. But I don't know. I think people have mixed opinions on it, and that's absolutely fine. But for me, I just think it's a massive no. And I really, really hope we just don't see anything like that with any of the drivers going ahead into the rest of the season, because that sort of behaviour is really not on. He is currently on 11 penalty points because of that incident. 11 penalty points means that he is one away from getting a race ban. Now his first set of penalty points will expire on June 30th. He needs to get through the rest of this month without a single incident causing him to get penalty points on his license, or he's getting a 1 race ban, which, look, Red Bull especially are really not going to want that right now. He is their top performing car. They need him in that seat. They need him there to help them get the points for the Constructors' Championship. But we will wait and see what happens. I'm hoping that he is going to err on the side of caution a little bit more, because 11 penalty points is a lot at the end of the day. You know, you don't want to see any driver get banned, but we'll wait and see what happens in the next couple of races. Before we finish though, it's time for my winners and losers of the Spanish Grand Prix, kicking off with my winners. First one on the list has to be Fernando Alonso, because he got his first points of the season. It deserves to be celebrated, guys. So he is one of my winners. Nico Hülkenberg, because P5 in a Sauber is absolutely incredible. And then I have 2 teams. We've got Ferrari and McLaren. McLaren, obviously, it was a 1-2 in qualifying, a 1-2 in the race. Incredible race from them, and just went to show that their Flexi-Wing was not giving them that much of a speed advantage. Ferrari, I've put on them because, yeah, to go from P4 to P2 in the space of 1 weekend in the Constructors' Championship. I have some thoughts about how this has happened, and I think it's more down to the fact that they've got 2 good drivers that have managed to take a not great car into the points very consistently. Mercedes have had issues, obviously, with their power units and DNFs, and then Red Bull have just got a problem with that second seat. However, a win's a win. A P2 is a P2, so I do think that is pretty good for them. Losers though, I do have 3 of them. Max Verstappen is top of the list, and let's be honest, it was problems of his own doing. He didn't need to be down in P10 with a 10-second time penalty and 11 points on his license, but here we are. After that, we've also got Williams, because it was rough. It was a rough weekend from qualifying into the race. It did not get better for them. And then finally on that list is Mercedes. P4 from George Russell was great, don't get me wrong, but to have another engine issue, okay, wasn't with a Mercedes car last weekend, but was with one of their engines, is a little concerning, and their pace did seem a little bit off throughout the entire weekend. But that is it for the Spanish GP. We are done with this triple header. Next week though, I am gonna have a chat just overall looking at this triple header, what happened and who performed well over these 3 races, and what we might look at going into the next couple. So keep an eye out for that. It is going to be Eid on Friday, so Eid Mubarak to all of you guys who celebrate. Thank you so much for listening, and diolch yn fawr. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at stewards_office, and I will see you guys the next time you're summoned to the Stewards office.